Okay, all right guys, this is the transmission we're going to be taking apart in the lab. It's a 3 or 4 speed transmission. Transmission means rear wheel drive. Here's where the clutch goes. Clutch disc splines to the input shaft. Okay, that's right here. This is the guts, what's inside. Okay, the only thing we don't have is the reverse. Okay, so there's input shaft of the transmission. So this is whenever the clutch is engaged, this is turning. Okay, shift linkage goes here. Output is here. So this is going to your drive shaft, out to the differential, and to the rear wheels, which is there. This is the exact same guts as what's inside here. Input, output. Okay? Clutch engaged, this is turning. When this transmission's in gear, this is turning. Okay? Slide this out of the way. So, here's our parts. Input shaft. We have 3 shafts. Input shaft. Now, as you can see, I'll carefully remove this. There's a bearing inside that's already fallen apart on us once. The input shaft is separate from everything else. So when this transmission's in neutral, this input shaft here, this is not, okay? So when you engage the clutch, this turns, okay? And this is separate from this shaft. This is the main shaft, okay? Some people call it the output shaft. This is output, but it's got all the main gears onto it. This gear, this shaft here is called the counter shaft. Now when we talked about gears, when one gear turns, it turns the other gear in the opposite direction. So we need to have an extra set of gears. So this, if this is turning clockwise, this one's turning counterclockwise, and then this ones here are going to turn the gears on the main shaft. And when they turn the gears on the main shaft, oh, we do have reverse. When they turn the gears on the main shaft, and the main shaft's going to turn clockwise again. So all of this sits inside this transmission like that. So this is what we're seeing inside that transmission. The input shaft turns counter shaft. Counter shaft is one solid piece. You can see everything is one solid piece here. Okay? And when the input shaft turns the first gear on the main gear on the counter shaft, it turns all the speed gears on the main shaft. Now all these gears are in constant mesh. All the gears are turning at once. So one of the things that we have here, there's your input shaft. Let's get this off. Here is your first synchronizer. Okay? There's our first, there's the synchronizer. Put it down that way. Always make sure you know which way you're putting them in, because you don't want to put this stuff upside down. This is a speed gear. Now you notice the speed gear is smooth on the inside. It's not attached. It slides onto the main shaft, but all these speed gears spin freely. They are not attached to the shaft. So when the first gear on the input shaft, the gear on the input shaft, one gear on the input shaft, turns the counter shaft, and these start to turn, all these gears are free to spin. So when we're in neutral, no gears engaged, all these gears are just spinning freely in the wind, okay? So everybody needs to make sure, a lot of guys have a hard time understanding this. These gears are not attached. They're on, but they are free to spin, okay? So these gears are set up, okay, in a certain order. On a transmission, get in there. Okay, oops. Okay. Put it in upside down. You gotta make sure you put it in right side up. Okay. In there. Get that in the right spot. 1 second. Buckle it around here. I'll explain this stuff in a bit. Okay. Actually, no, I gotta get this on and explain. Okay? Don't laugh at me. You guys are gonna have just as a hard time. You guys are gonna put this all together wrong and break stuff and everything. Okay? There we go. Okay. So the gears are set up based on gear ratios. Little gear turns a big gear, gives us overdrive. Little gear turns a big gear. So first gear, input shaft turns counter shaft power out through the first gear. Second gear, this gear gets bigger. Third gear, this gear gets bigger. Fourth gear is actually direct drive, where we're going to lock these two shafts together. Okay? Now, I'm wondering, how do we engage the gears? The gears are engaged by this unit here, which is the synchronizer. The synchronizer brings everything up to speed, as I explained before. Okay? The synchronizer ring, synchronizer here, you can see is splined to the shaft. So whenever this shaft is turning, that synchronizer is turning, but I can hold the speed gear in place. Synchronizer here has teeth. You can see. Can we zoom in on the teeth? You can see the teeth. And then there's teeth, they call them the dog teeth, on the speed gear. When I slide this synchronizer sleeve over, now that gear is now locked to the shaft. The teeth on the dog teeth line up with the teeth inside the synchronizer sleeve, and when they do, it locks that gear to the shaft. As you can see, the other gears will spin freely. Okay? If the synchronizer works properly, the other gears spin freely. Only this gear is locked to the shaft. Okay? So, first gear, we would slide the synchronizer this way. This one will slide over. First gear is locked to the shaft. Second and third are moving freely. When we want to go from first to second, we move first over. We come out of first. Okay, now it's stuck. Easier said than done. Screwdriver. No screwdriver. Okay, should have had a screwdriver handy. We engage second. First comes unengaged, second engages. Okay? We want to go into third. We disengage second. Okay? Engage third. Third's engaged. Second and first spin freely. To get direct drive, we actually will lock the main shaft to the input shaft. So when these two are locked together, we have direct power straight out. Okay? So power flow on all gears except direct. Okay? We come input shaft turns counter shaft. The counter shaft is turning all the speed gears. We lock the gear to the shaft with the synchronizer, and then we get power output. Okay, remember, what's splined to the main shaft? The synchronizers. The gears spin freely. Okay? Okay. This synchronizer. Synchronizer, we do not take it apart because it's a bugger. I'll use the bugger B word to put this thing back together. Okay? So, inside this synchronizer, we have multiple parts. In the center is the hub. The hub has splines. The splines are splined to the main shaft. So these splines sit on those splines on the main shaft. Okay? The sleeve is on the outside. This portion here that's going to slide back and forth. This is what slides back and forth. The hub stays still. This hub stays still. The sleeve slides back and forth. The shift fork sits on here. We want to engage one gear, we slide the sleeve this way. We want to engage the other gear, we're going to slide the sleeve the other way. Inside, we have usually three keyways, 3 keys, and those 3 keys are going to line up to the 3 keys on the ring, okay? This is a synchronizer ring, okay? We have the hub, we have the sleeve, we have the keys, we have the ring. Everything here is made out of steel. This is usually made out of brass. It's made out of steel. It's going to have a little friction material on here, similar like a little brake pad. Okay, I'll show you some different pictures of that. So those keys, okay, are going to lock that ring from turning. It will not turn. Okay? And that ring has got a little cone shape to it, and this is its matching gear. And you can see the cone shape. I don't know, you should be able to see the cone shape. It's cone shape there. This is cone shape too. It sits on there. In neutral position, it turns. Okay? We got turning. So the two are turning independently of each other. Okay? When we start to engage this synchronizer, this ring gets pushed up the ramp of that cone and jams itself in there. So the two begin to turn as one. So when I push down, it turns it as one. When it's released, it turns freely. Okay? So as we push down, it grabs and turns. Now synchronizer, it synchronizes. Oh, that's really cool. Wow. There we go, blooper reel. Synchronizer synchronizes the speed. This synchronizer is turning at the same speed as our main output shaft. So when you put your foot on the clutch and this car is moving, you disengage the engine from the transmission, but this shaft still keeps turning because the wheels at the other end are turning the main shaft. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to bring this gear up to the same speed as the main shaft so that the gear will engage smoothly. If the two are going at different speeds, we get grinding of the gears. So let's push this in a little bit. And when they're trying to go, I don't know if you can hear it, we get grinding of the gears when you forgot to put your foot on the clutch or did something wrong, okay? Obviously that's bad. So all our engagement is these little dog teeth here. Not very big, easy to break off. So when this synchronizer starts to slide over, it's pushing the ring up that ramp, grabbing it and turning it at the same speed. So normal operation, this is turning with the main shaft, this thing here is turning with the counter shaft. Okay? When we start to shove, first thing we do, we put our foot on the clutch. When we put our foot on the clutch, stops the input shaft. When the input shaft stops or slows down, the counter shaft slows down. This gear slows down, but the main shaft is still turning fast. So when we shove this over, we push that ring up the ramp, and when that ring goes up the ramp, these two start to spin together, and when they spin together, we can engage it smoothly. When they're going at different speeds, okay, you can see as I push, it engages nice and smooth. Without the ring, as I start to slide, I start to push this over, it takes a bit to try to get it over. Okay? And if this thing was turning fast, it can be turning a couple of thousand RPM, you're going to get grinding before it engages. Okay? Synchronizer synchronizes the speed. The main shaft and the speed gear have to be going at the same speed to engage smoothly. Okay? And when we want to go the other way, it's just going to slide a different direction. All right. Standard transmission cutaway. Input shaft. What goes on here? clutch disc. There we go. Clutch disc is the input shaft here. Clutch disc, when the clutch is engaged, this is turning. Clutch disengaged, stops turning. Okay? Output shaft, here. When the transmission's in gear, output shaft is turning. When the wheels are turning, the output shaft is turning. Okay? Here, we have an internal shift mechanism. So we have this direct internal shift mechanism. Everything is in here. The linkage, the detents, everything is inside the transmission. Nice and clean, no linkages to adjust out here. Everything stays nice and lubricated. Beautiful, right? So here's our gears. Again, input shaft gear. Counter shaft gears. One solid piece. Up here we have our speed gears. We start in the back with 1, 2, 3, direct drive, synchronizer sleeve, inside the synchronizer hub, which is splined to the shaft, okay? And we also have our synchronizer sleeves. Engine's turning. The input shaft is turning the counter shaft. The counter shaft gears are turning the speed gears on the main shaft. Notice everything is going. We got different speeds. We're in neutral. I can hold this output shaft. We're in neutral. Notice in neutral, car's not moving, so we're sitting at a stoplight. Notice the synchronizers are not turning because they're splined to the output shaft. Okay, and I'm holding this. I'm going to hold this tight, and you can see so clutch is engaged, engine's turning, transmission's in neutral, no turning of the shaft. You can see the synchronizers not turning. All the speed gears are turning because we're turning here. If we put our foot on the clutch at the lights, we have stop turning here, we have no turning here, nothing moves inside. Okay, you can have that, I have that on my Jeep. You can hear the gears rattling. You put your foot on the clutch, it stops. So shifting. Shifting here, you can see shift fork is attached to the synchronizer sleeve. That's a shift fork here. Another shift fork there. When I put it into first, the sleeve slides over. See, take a watch. Sleeve slides over. The hub stays still. The sleeve slides over. The dog teeth here are now locked to the teeth on the inside of the sleeve, and now we're in first gear. You let go of the clutch, okay? Power flow, we let go of the clutch and we start to move. The input shaft is turning the counter shaft. The counter shaft gears are turning all the speed gears. This one's being turned, this one's being turned, but since they're not locked to the shaft, they're just spinning along, going for the ride. But our first gear on the counter shaft is turning the first gear on the main shaft, which is now locked to the main shaft through the synchronizer, and we have first gear output. Very low gear. I can't hold this back now because it's turning. Okay? We have low gear, first gear. We shift downwards into 2. Now watch what happens first. We have to first disengage first gear. We're going through neutral, so we're in no gear, and then we engage second. So we come out of first, through neutral, into second. Always have to go through neutral first. That first gear has to be disengaged before we engage the next gear. 2 gears at the same time are engaged, boom, transmission explodes. You're picking gear out of your feet, okay? So now we've engaged second gear. Power flow comes from the input shaft to the counter shaft. All these gears are still spinning. First gear is still spinning, but it's free to turn at whatever speed it wants. Second gear is now locked to the shaft. This gear is now locked to the sleeve. which is splined to the hub, which is splined to the main shaft. So this gear is now the one that's getting turned. Power flow is going through this. And now we have second gear, so we're going to have a slightly higher gear ratio. Third, again, second is disengaged. Okay, really nice if it's third. Third is here. Notice first, second, third. We're moving our way forward in the transmission. Third gear. Power flow, input shaft, counter shaft to the speed gear, which is locked to the sleeve, which is locked to the hub, which is locked to the main shaft, which gives us our power output. Okay. Fourth gear, we're going again through neutral, right? We're in neutral, then forward. We've now locked the input shaft to the main shaft, and we have direct power output. The counter shaft is still turning, the speed gears are still turning, but they're free on the shaft. This synchronizer is loose, not doing anything, and we have this input shaft, the dog teeth on the input shaft, locked to the synchronizer sleeve, which is locked to the main shaft, and we have direct drive out. We would be able to watch this and watch this shaft, and they're turning at the exact same speed. That's direct drive. That's fourth gear. If we had a fifth gear, sixth gear, they'd be overdrive gears. And usually fifth and sixth, they would stick back in here, further behind. Okay? Now, if you take a good another notice, here, little gear drives a big gear, gear reduction. Notice as we move forward, this gear gets a little bigger, this gear gets a little smaller. This gear gets a little bigger, this gear gets a little smaller. They're getting closer to the same size, but they're not exactly the same size. We might have 4 to 1, 3 to 1, 2 to 1, and then when we lock this in fourth, we are in direct drive, 1 to 1. Take a good look again. Input shaft turned by the clutch. Counter shaft is turned by the gear. Only one gear on the input shaft is turned by that gear. Whenever the clutch is engaged, counter shaft is turning. Okay, all the speed gears are turning. Okay, at this point in time, we're in neutral, and I can hold the back, and you can see the synchronizers don't turn. To engage a gear, let's go into third. We're sliding the sleeve over, which locks the teeth on the speed gear, the dog teeth on the speed gear, to the synchronizer sleeve. When that sleeve is over the dog teeth, this is now the output gear. Power flow through, out, through the synchronizer. Now, so we actually have a little bit of backward movement here, okay? So that's how this transmission shifts the gears. You have to remember all gears, first, second, third, fourth. We move from the back to the front. Okay? Done. Now I'm just showing it to you.
But okay. I thought it might be a good idea to see where to post.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, as we say, here's our trend. Are you ready to go? Okay, transmission components again. Input shaft. Clutch disc turns the input shaft. It ends at these dog teeth right here. Okay, it ends there. Gear, dog teeth. If you take a look at these dog teeth, some of them look a little damaged. Take a look, you can see they're flattened out. Okay? Counter shaft. Counter shaft is one solid shaft. You break a tooth, you replace the whole counter shaft. Speed gears. First, second, third speed gears. And the speed gears, remember, they're smooth on the inside. They're not locked to the shaft. Synchronizer. Synchronizer sleeve. Underneath is the hub. And then in here we have these extra one, that's the synchronizer ring. You can see that moves. And that, when that synchronizer ring gets shoved over up the ramp, it grabs that speed gear and turns them all as one. You can see that here. Smooth. Okay? I can turn this, I can turn that. Smooth gear, it jams it up, brings everything up to the same speed, okay? And locks it into place. Okay? Okay, so here's our clutch components. The main components of the clutch.
Start over. I fucked up. Start over.
Okay. Things inside here. First gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear. Okay? Where's reverse on this? First, third, fourth. Reverse. Nope, second. Reverse. Okay. So, tell me when you're ready. I suggest we come back in a couple of weeks.
Yeah?
Well, what time?